Is the squat, bench, deadlift worth doing at all for hypertrophy? There's been a lot of talk in the past few years about the squat, bench, and deadlift for hypertrophy. There was the opposing argument against powerlifters giving hypertrophy advice, which was just getting strong at the compound lifts. Then there's the hypertrophy-focused individuals saying it's a waste of time and they're not optimal for hypertrophy. And you have the in-betweens who say you still need to have a good base of the compounds, then focus on isolations. And finally, you have the consumer of this information often being left more confused because of the conflicting advice. And before I share with you my philosophy on this, I want to put out there that I have no emotional connection to any particular styles of training. I only care about my goals and finding the style of training that will get me there. I have long-term goals and short-term goals with my training. However, I'll just say for now that my short-term goal is to build as much muscle as I can and get as big as I can and end up with a well-proportioned physique like the golden era guys talked about back then. With that being said, I will do whatever it takes to get to that goal. If you told me I had to do intense hot yoga to build a classic physique, then I would become the best person at doing hot yoga. I am not obsessed with the idea of that a certain style could give me great results. Rather, I look for the things that are actually getting me the results. The only thing I may favor more in my training is going hard. I never really like stopping short of what I could keep doing. I'm naturally like this, and I've even spent several months actually tracking my RPE for every lift and every set, and I just didn't enjoy my training as much, and I missed pushing myself. So as an enjoyment factor, for me, I like to favor higher intensity training. Which, if you watched any of my past videos, you've probably heard me say that since I started allowing myself to train hard and not hold back because of other training philosophies, I have actually seen my progress just take off, especially after being stuck in that late beginner stage. So with all that said, from a hypertrophy perspective, I think the squat, bench, and deadlift are fine lifts for the absolute beginner to become efficient at. However, I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think if you are just getting into lifting weights, doing compound movements can be useful for someone to learn how to control their entire body during the lift. Because even for isolations, you have to learn how to control your body during the lift, even if it means you are not using a certain muscle so that you can put tension on another muscle. This is something that someone starting out really won't be able to do because they haven't built up that muscle control. Doing compound lifts will train the beginner to fully contract their entire body. That is, if they are doing it right, which is a skill just like learning how to relax a certain muscle during a lift where you're isolating a specific muscle or section of a muscle. Now, how long this takes depends on how quickly that person learns the technique and becomes efficient at that lift. Once technique is good, hypertrophy results will occur as a beginner, and if I were coaching someone, I would still have them perform that lift as long as they were seeing results and that lift was not interfering with other areas of their training. And as soon as problems do arise, I would try to isolate the problem and see if it can be fixed through different programming methods like frequency, volume, reps, and so on. But if the lift itself seems to be causing too much of a nuisance on the training and taking away from hypertrophy, then I would either explore variations or pick another lift that solved the problem that lift was creating. Oftentimes, people will become decently strong at any of these lifts, and they think they must keep adding weight, reps, or volume to see progress. And they continue to do that, but in that process they have manipulated their technique so they can achieve that goal, which now that new technique is taking away from their hypertrophy results. Another issue some may run into is becoming ridiculously strong even with good technique, but they are stalled with growing, which could be a programming issue of just training in low rep ranges exclusively, or it could be because that person may actually have an advantage with their leverages and they might just be a really good presser or a good puller, which may lead to good results on paper as far as numbers go, but not as great results in the mirror. What I have found for hypertrophy training is that it is most often more beneficial to train in a way that is harder or that forces you to use less weight. For example, I'm currently incline barbell pressing 125 pounds for around 8 to 10 reps. I know I could go higher if I wanted to. However, I wouldn't be able to use the same technique that I'm using currently. This doesn't mean I'm just going light and feeling the movement. I'm picking a weight where I can fully use my chest muscle to grind the weight instead of loading it up and letting my shoulder take over. Sure, I'm still getting the chest to work even at the heavier weight, but this is my way of modifying a compound lift to work for my targeted muscle. I think the problem isn't necessarily with the lift, it's just that people put a lift with a certain technique with specific progression metrics on a pedestal. And even with the movement away from the compounds to do just only isolations, I think the same problem will exist just on the other side of the spectrum. And sure, we can sit here all day and argue about the technicalities of every lift and how some are more optimal than others. But at the end of the day, the only thing you should be worried about is what you've done, what's worked for you, and if something hasn't worked for you, why hasn't it worked for you? Because maybe some of you just need to learn how to make a lift work for you. Because I think it's great we have all these machines nowadays, but try taking away the machines and you're only left with free weights. And let's say I'll even give you a cable machine because I have one. Well, now you're gonna make that barbell work for you, and you're gonna find variations with the cables and dumbbells. A machine cannot hide bad technique. Eventually, your results will represent your technique and ability to train your muscle. Let me say that one more time. A machine cannot hide bad technique. Eventually, your results will represent your technique and ability to train your muscle. So, my overall message is to not be so hung up on compounds, isolations, machines, or free weights. Focus on your technique for hitting the muscle you want to hit and hit it hard. It doesn't matter what method you use to get there. As long as you got there, then that's all that matters. At the end of the day, do bodybuilders win the Olympia because they train with high intensity and low volume, or high volume and low intensity? No, obviously not. They won because they didn't let their ego get in the way of their training and they gravitated towards what's working, not just take one or two perspectives on training and just went with it.